Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for our weekend preview. It's Newcastle United versus Southampton tomorrow, 5:30 kickoff up at St James's Park. Joined here by Lee, Ryder and Chris Waugh. Before we get on to that game, Chris and Lee were one of the selected few to head up to St James's Park to speak to Lee Charnley about the accounts. That's where we'll start. Lee, everyone's seen the figures, but I just want to get your what was Lee Charnley's feeling when you walked into the room? What did you sense from him? Was he happy with the numbers that came out?
I mean, obviously they seem to be satisfied that they're now in a position where they are making a profit. Obviously they should be, because they've been in the Premier League a couple of years now, and they pretty much laid it on the line that while there is money to spend, they can't go crazy. But I think most people have come to the conclusion there's 50 or 60 million pound to spend this summer, perhaps 100 million over the next two seasons for Rafa. So yeah, I mean, people have asked for a bit more information, a bit more transparency. They've provided that. Whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, that's something completely different, but at least they've come to the fore and they've made the feelings clear, and they've put it all down on paper. And now really, they've said in the statement they want high quality signings. So we're all looking forward to seeing who these high quality signings will be.
Chris, I mean, one thing that came out of the accounts was the importance of being in the Premier League, and it sounds a bit daft because we all know how important it is, but when you've got the numbers down there, like the increase in profit, increase from money taken in from the TV companies, I mean, Newcastle United have to be in the Premier League.
They do. I mean, last summer we had quotes from Charnley such as that it was a bloodbath when they went down, and if you looked at the amount they lost the season in the Championship, because obviously these accounts cover the 2017-18 season, so this is for last season. So Newcastle, it is essentially on the Premier League. What I would say is that if you look at their position compared to someone like Bournemouth or Brighton, they aren't as heavily reliant on that money as, say, Bournemouth. I think it's 90% of their revenue comes from the Premier League TV money. Newcastle is substantially lower, but still, the fact that the wages are so high at Newcastle, not comparatively necessarily other Premier League clubs, but just in general, and also given the overheads and everything that comes with the Premier League, the TV money, the commercial revenue you get centrally. Newcastle sponsors, so deals with Puma and Fun88, they also get more money if they're in the Premier League than if they're in the Championship. In all sponsorship deals like that, you get higher revenue. So yeah, it's essential for the club's survival that they're in the Premier League. But what I would like to stress is that shouldn't be the be all and end all. The suggestion from the club is that it isn't, that there's a perception that survival is all that Newcastle ever want. They insist that isn't the case. Well, hopefully going forward we'll see that isn't the case, and that they show a bit of ambition, because that's what it's felt like over the last few years. Now we need to move forward, and it needs to be that, yes, Premier League survival first and foremost, but then beyond that you have to start competing, whether it's for a top 8 finish, whether it's for trophies, for whatever it may be.
Most certainly. We'll go over the numbers now just for those who haven't read them or seen them. It's 18.6 million in profit. They have paid 33 million pound back to Mike Ashley, which leaves 111 million of that kind of long-term loan. The media income rose to 119.6 million. That's up from 79, and there was 108% increase in turnover, from 93 million to 178.5. One of the notable things was that the wages had come down, so suggests that there is scope for movement this summer. However, when you look at it, it is only scope, and I say only scope, of about 7 million, which if you're getting in one, maybe two highly paid players, then that's not really going to go all that far.
Yeah, and obviously everything's changed as well. The wages have gone up in the last couple of years. The transfer fees have gone up, and Newcastle traditionally, they don't like paying out big numbers. So Rondon, obviously his situation is going to come to a conclusion at some point, one way or another, and there's talk that he will want a big wage to sign for Newcastle permanently. There'll be his last big contract in football with him being 29. So if he's going to be asking for 120,000 a week or 130,000 a week, whatever it may be, will Newcastle put that forward? You don't get the feeling they will, because they haven't done that in the past. Some players will go. I think Shelby will go. I think Hayden will go. So that'll clear up some of the wage bill. getting rid of Shelvey's a big earner off the books, 90 grand a week. So for Shelvey to go, that it paves the way for someone else to come in. But really, the one contract they've got to get sorted is Rafa Benitez.
You say that Shelvey leaves, you get a big wage packet off, but to have to replace someone of Shelvey's ability, it's just going to cost you the same amount of money, if not more, a week to do that, isn't it?
It'll cost more because, as I say, things have moved on in the last couple of years. If you're a top player, and if it's, you know, some players want to be in London, well, for whatever reason that is, they don't want to come to the North East. I don't agree with that personally, because obviously North East is a fantastic place. You know, most players who come here have gone, oh, actually it is brilliant up here. We want to stay here forever. But the reality is that initially a player from League One or Spain, the first choice will be London, because that's what they know, and the London clubs can pay the money. So that means Newcastle have to pay even more for certain players. So that's why you need a manager like Rafa Benitez in the middle of it all to have something to sell to the player. That's what he's done with some of his signings, and they're going to need someone with a bit of oomph to do it again this summer.
Just the point on Shelvey though, I accept what you're saying to a degree on quality, but at the moment you have a guy who's in £90,000 a week who can't even get in the team. So in that sense, it makes a lot of business sense as well. If you can get a reasonable transfer fee from you cover those wages off. Hopefully, if you bring someone in on the same wages or higher, they in theory are meant to be a first team player. It's someone you would expect on that for that sort of money. Certainly at Newcastle, where he's the highest earner to actually be in the first team, and Shelvey can't even get in the first 11 at the minute.
So it's recycling the resource in a way, isn't it? So that the 90. So say you've got a spare 60,000 plus Shelvey goes the 90,000. Suddenly you can pay a top striker 130 grand a week. So Newcastle got to be very clever with the way they do it here, because there are limitations with the money they've got.
It certainly is. I mean, do you think that we are only 1-2 good signings away, and then one kind of big name quality signing away from Newcastle fans going, all right, it's not perfect, however, you know that you bring in this striker and he is getting paid £110,000 a week, he has cost 25 million, and then Newcastle fans, I'm not going to say this, they start to change their mind on Mike Ashley, because we know that's never going to happen unless something drastic does occur. But they start to go, right, okay, this is where we can now build, and this is where we can now see the future is looking a little bit brighter.
Well, if Rafa Benitez is still in charge, I would say yes. There's always going to be some fans who, no matter what Mike Ashley does, then they're always going to be sceptical and cynical because of what's happened in the previous 12 seasons. And you can't really disagree with them having that opinion to a certain extent. But if they can convince Rafa Benitez to stay for a start, well, that would show a certain sea change to a degree, because Benitez has already laid out that he believes the club needs to change. The fact that Benitez came in 3 years ago was a change to a degree. If he stays, commits for however long it may be going forward, well, he's obviously seen at least some compromise from above. Then you can hope over time that changes. And yeah, if a few more signings a la Almiron come in, so if you get, say, a few more of that sort of remit, exciting players, you would imagine that any of these high quality signings that Newcastle United are talking about, you would imagine they're going to be under the age of 26. That is probably going to be the proviso of this, that Benitez in theory will want the flexibility to sign experienced players, but if he's going to be spending big money, very much Newcastle's blueprint is that it's going to be signed under the age of 26 that Almiron sort of fits. So going forward, hopefully they're going to be looking to get some of the top talent that maybe the top six have missed out on, or that they're not quite in that top six quality bracket, but they can get in that next level and be competing with the likes of Everton and Wolves really for those 7th, 8th, 9th positions.
I guess Chris makes a good point there about Rafa Benitez, because whereas you can say, yeah, we made £18.6 million profit, you know, the media income's gone up, all these numbers to many Newcastle United fans actually mean relatively little anyway. But if Rafa Benitez isn't here in 6 weeks' time, then or 2 months' time, it matters even less.
Well, that's it. I mean, that is unless they bring in somebody unbelievable as boss, and it would take a big name to follow Rafa Benitez. Be a hard act to follow. I've touched on this before. How difficult it was when Kevin Keegan left the first time. Kenny Dalglish wasn't even a big enough name. I mean, at the time when Dalglish first come in, people were excited. He'd won the Premier League with Blackburn. They thought, right, we've got the dream ticket now. Didn't work out that way. Dalglish left a very frustrated figure. But to follow Rafa Benitez with the way the political climate is would be a huge act to follow. You're talking somebody like Jose Mourinho to come in to really get people to stand up and take full notice. Anybody less than that sort of bracket of manager, the world-class bracket, is going to be a big come down, and they're going to find it very difficult. And I know things would settle down, and if they won a few games early in the season and they got a few signings in, people would settle down. But why risk it?
Most certainly. I mean, Chris, once all the stories came out last night about the accounts, social media was an interesting place to be. I think Mark Douglas has already addressed this, and he probably will address it next week in a podcast next week. But accusations of being handpicked, accusations of not giving all the information out there through our coverage, being accused of being on the club's side. It's all a bit daft in a way, isn't it? Because that's not the principles of journalism as a whole. And if people actually read the coverage, we've been fair, we've been balanced. But I think it's quite clear that most people on this desk, if not all, there's one man to take this club forward. Yeah, well,
I think that one of the big accusations that's been levelled against the club over the last decade or so is that they don't communicate often enough, and I would certainly level that at them. I still don't think they do communicate often enough. We had the rare opportunity to go up and speak to Lee Charnley. We didn't select who was going to be in the room. They chose who was going to be there, so we got a briefing, and so did a few national journalists and a few local radio journalists.
But that has happened most years previously, hasn't it?
Yeah, usually around the accounts time. So last year I went up as well, and so they want to give their position across. They want to show things within the accounts that maybe when you get the raw figures, you don't necessarily get all the information from that. And because none of us are accountants and none of us pretend to be, we don't necessarily get that. So there's also a financial advisor in the room from the club, and they were providing information. Do I agree with everything the club said? Do I agree with the club's position on everything? No, I don't, but we can only portray how it is that they put it across. We give them the right of reply, we give them the right to speak in their sort of way, and then we analyse it and we give our own point of view. And fans may disagree, Rafa Benitez may disagree with a lot of it, but as you say, as journalists, our position is to give across what the club think. I agree with something Mark Douglas has said quite frequently, that we, as the local newspaper, are sort of a critical friend of the club. We're not in bed with them, in inverted commas, so to speak, but at the same time there needs to be a relationship there. If you don't engage, how are we ever going to get the answers that fans want? There was a lot of couple of months ago after a fan had followed Lee Charnley with the camera and asked him a lot of questions which Lee Charnley didn't answer, and we got a lot of stuff on social media saying we should have done that. Well, that's not how journalism works. We have to abide by certain rules and regulations, and my answer to that would be there were no answers from Lee Charnley to that. We've got some answers from him on Wednesday. Are they as extensive as we want? Have we got all the answers we want? Are they as clear as we want? No, not yet, but hopefully we're building that over time, and at some point the club will become more and more engaged, because I do think that they need to start building that connection with the fans, and the way to do that, in my opinion, is to speak more.
Most certainly, but I mean, there is only one man, is there, in both your eyes, to take this club forward? That is Benitez.
Yeah, most certainly.
If he gets the backing, then he is the man to take the club forward. If he doesn't get the backing, and it's a contract that is kind of made to just to appease things, as in like a 12-month extension with a little bit of money to spend, then
it's no good for anyone.
It's no good for Rafa. It's no good for the club. So look, it's turned into surprise, turned into a soap opera yet again at Newcastle over something that should have been sorted a long time ago. Newcastle, from their point of view, they claim they've been trying to do this for 18 months. From Rafa's side, he's not going to commit to anything unless he's got certain assurances. He hasn't had them assurances. He's made it clear he's not asking for 200 million, not even asking for 100 million. He's asking for a slicker process with transfers, decisions, getting an answer out of Mike Ashley quicker, all things like that they're really frustrating him, and it is going to come to a head in the very near future.
Well, that is the excellent point. We'll get on to now the money that is supposedly there to spend. First of all, what did you make of Charnley and his words about what they've already spent. There was a pre-agreed budget apparently of 70 million plus player sales, so it's about 52 million pounds worth. And Lee Charnley says they've spent 90% of that budget. I think that leaves about 11 million, and that'll roll on into the summer. Of course, fans will say, well, where's the Mitrovic money gone, etc., etc. What did you make of Charnley's take on that?
Well, I think they probably spent more than people expected, because people have this theory that they don't spend anything. So they do obviously spend some money. When Rafa didn't, the key point here is when Rafa didn't sign last summer, and then it got kind of parked, the contract situation, and then Rafa was trying to sign certain players, and then there was stories circulating in the press coming from the Ashley camp that why should Mike Ashley give him the money to spend when he's not committing to a contract. So they're saying 90% of the money is being spent, but realistically, is Rafa Benitez going to be looking at it and thinking, but you said that if I'd have signed I would have had more money to spend? So you just wonder how much money really is in the kitty for them to push on and make it a success going forward.
And also, I think that one thing you got from the account, which we already knew, but just rubber stamped everything, was that Mike Ashley is not going to put any more money into this football club. He's taken his £33 million of his 144 million he had in the club back, plus the 10 million he loaned a portion of last season. So, and it's made it clear basically that you're living within your means, as he's already said, and these accounts tell you all of that as well, because the club's position is, with the turnover and the amount of money we usually spend, we're going to have roughly between 45 and 55 million, that sort of ballpark figure, if these finances continue year on year going forward for finances. And that's it. There's no. Whereas you look at someone like Everton's accounts or whatever, they've received a big loan from Mashiri. You get into other clubs where the owner puts more money in. That's not going to happen at Newcastle United as long as Mike Ashley is owner.
It's funny that it gets termed as a loan, isn't it? Because if you're the owner of a football club, like it's like you couldn't get a loan to like pay your mortgage off, sort of thing. You know what I mean? It's like that's your responsibility. You've got to pay it, and you've got to put it back in. But I just think that realistically for Rafa, it's frustrating. The owner, it's great that this club have come out and spoke, and Lee Charnley's held the briefings, but the one man everybody wants to hear from is Mike Ashley. The one man everybody wants to interview is Mike Ashley. Unfortunately, he doesn't want to do interviews. He's done a couple with Sky. He's done one with the programme at the start of his reign at the club. But really, he's the one who's got the answers. And, if he's prepared to pay, 90 million for Debenhams, you just wonder why isn't he prepared to put a bit more into the club and go out and get that marquee signing. The answer is probably because he knows that if he does that, then he doesn't see the instant turnaround on that money. And really, Newcastle United is one of many of his, business projects, and it's probably the one he's least interested in.
It's a massive risk, though, isn't it? And I think we've probably covered this enough times, but as you mentioned it, we'll go at it again. It is a massive risk for Ashley to take that approach, because there's only so long that Benitez is going to stay at Newcastle just surviving relegation. You mentioned it after the Leicester game that he is sick of just surviving. He wants to at least be 7th to 12th every season and then go on from there. But then if Benitez goes, you haven't got a manager of his quality. No disrespect to this squad. If Benitez wasn't in charge right now, Saturday against Southampton, there'd be a lot more riding on that game, wouldn't there?
Well, arguably, yeah. I mean, the problem is that I just don't think Mike Ashley doesn't necessarily see it that way. And I think that, to be fair on Ashley, or certainly the hierarchy at Newcastle United over the last couple of years, the last 3 years, they've realised the importance of Rafa Benitez to a degree, which is why they want him to stay and why they are trying to convince him to stay. But whether they think he's worth so much as a manager that they have to bend so much in terms of in their own position to make sure he stays and cede to all of his demands is another matter entirely. And there is a bit of a stubbornness about the club. I think there is still a viewpoint that they were right during the 2015-16 season to a degree it just didn't quite happen for them that year, that the signings they made, because they made a profit on so many of them, because some of them are playing for Europe's top clubs, that they were right to a certain degree with that policy, and maybe they went a little bit too far with it, and that they're not going to bend completely just because there's a manager there who's done very well who's telling them to change. So yes, he will be gambling, but at the same time, this is a man who's gambled before, and he will gamble on these things again. He's a very stubborn man. He's very set in his ways, and I think that the fact that there is a bit of an ego clash between Ashley and Benitez themselves has been an issue for the last couple of years, and that's why things haven't been resolved in the time frame they should have been. And unfortunately, even if Benitez stays, I still think things will come to a head at some point going forward, as long as Mike Ashley's owner.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think anyone should be surprised if Ashley goes, "You've had your chance, I'm withdrawing it. Yeah. That's it, it's finished." Because he's taken on arguably bigger names within Newcastle United's history. So Kevin Keegan, he was happy to, pull the plug on that one. Alan Shearer, you don't get any bigger than Shearer and Keegan when it comes to Newcastle United. In world football, Benitez, you don't get any bigger. He will have no problem if it gets to the point pulling the plug on the deal, and then that's when it really kicks off. And it'll be in a situation where he'll look at it and go, well, Newcastle United, we're in the headlines, we're on the back pages, and you just wonder if he's looking at this as an opportunity to keep Newcastle United as his business in the headlines.
Oh, certainly. So on that kind of budget that is kind of there for the summer, 100 million over the next 2 seasons, that's not going to get you a lot of players in. But then it's never really been about the money, so to speak, as I think you've already kind of referenced it there. Like, it's been about speeding up the process, about getting the players in. It's about Benitez being able to say, look, if I've got 30 million to spend this summer and I want to go and spend 30 million on one player, then I can go and do it. And that's kind of where, for what I understand, that's where the stubbornness and that's where the kind of discontent is lying.
I mean, I was told in January that Rafa, off his own back, had a deal in place where Hostler would have left the club for a significant sum of 9 or 10 million pounds, something like that. And he had a deal in place with another striker, and had that money from Hostler become available to him, this striker, top striker from Europe, would have came across here. And that transaction could have been done, but he didn't get the approval for it. Obviously, Hostler didn't end up going. I think it was his club in China who wanted to sign him. It probably would have been for the best if Hostler would have gone, and this other striker could have taken you. He could be safe now if this other striker had come in, but he didn't get the opportunity to do it because he was waiting for green lights on certain situations, and it just didn't happen. So a scenario like that, he wants to have more control, where he doesn't have to keep going right to the top of the tree, say, please, can I do my job? That kind of attitude. And if you can get that sorted, brilliant. But the way Newcastle have been operating in the last 10 years, it's hard to see it happening, It's hard to see Mike Ashley going, you've got an open book to do what you want. They just don't seem to want to play like that.
Because he's proved that he could work within a tight budget, hasn't he? I mean, you give him £50 million over a season. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, but he could go out and get 3-4 decent enough players to take this club up to the next level.
Yeah, he can work within a tight budget. I think that long term, if he ever really does want to fulfil the ambitions he stresses, which is to make Newcastle a top 8 team and competing for trophies, there does need to be greater investment, because as well as they've done so far, and while I think that other clubs have spent a lot of money very badly, I do think that Newcastle at some point, to really up the quality of player they want to sign, they're going to have to start going at the 20, 30, 40 million pound ballpark figure on a regular basis, because that's the way the market's going. Unless the market suddenly starts slowing down, then that's going to happen long term. I will say that he can potentially be supplemented by outgoings. Now, Shelvey, hopefully, if he does go, they'll get a reasonable amount of money from, you'd like to think. But it's about making sure that if they do get that, they can reinvest it quickly and straight away. So the example Lee gives there from January, maybe they were going to get 9 million or whatever for Hostler, but was Benitez going to be able to spend that straight away? So in Benitez's eyes, he thinks, well, why am I letting a player go for that amount of money and I'm not going to be able to replace him right now? He needs to know that if someone leaves, say if Isaac Hayden goes this summer, whatever fee they get for Isaac Hayden, he wants to be able to reinvest to make sure he's got a replacement of at least equal standing, if not better. So it's about the process. It's about the way Newcastle do transfers. It's about the speed of doing transfers. And at the moment, I don't think he's been overly impressed by what he's seen with all the last 3 years, to say the least.
And 30 or 40 million is probably the going rate for an average striker. I mean, the top strikers in Spain and Italy are going to cost you 80 or 90 million at the moment, because that's the price tag at the minute. Some of them perhaps even more. But because the minute that new Premier League club becomes interested in a player, suddenly the price rockets up, and the Italian clubs and the Spanish clubs, they put extra money on top of it, and Newcastle, that's the market Newcastle are in, and they have to deal with it.
And yet you have a player who's got 10 goals this season, and he's probably going to be available for no more than a price of 20.5 million. Obviously that's Rondon, obviously his wages, agent fees, etc. But we talk about the market. Benitez has proved he can go out there and find these sort of players, and you have a proven Premier League goal scorer who wants to join Newcastle, who is fitted into Benitez's system. And it seems like we're stuck record here, but yet again, Newcastle United are stumbling on making this deal, which could prove crucial to Benitez actually signing a new contract.
Yeah, I mean, even 20 million for Rondon would be a snip, really, when you consider the market. I don't know about you. I mean, maybe you get the same impression of me, but I just think Newcastle, not frightened isn't the right word, but they're concerned about the huge wage demands of Rondon and his management team, the big signing on fee, and then suddenly 20 million becomes 26, 27 million. Mike Ashley doesn't like signing big checks off to agents. He's been scarred by that from the very start of his... When he took over at Newcastle in 2007, a lot of the deals that Allardyce had were already in place, and he couldn't stop them from happening. So Alan Smith, for example, coming in from Man United, big fees paid there. He, I think if you remember, he had Alan Smith's name on the back of his shirt. I don't know if that was tongue in cheek at the time or not. I don't know, but obviously he's in his mind, he's got a football fan's mentality. And if a player isn't doing well, who's cost a lot of money, he won't look at it from like a football management coaching point of view. He look at it from a fan's point of view, just going, oh well, he was a flop, and you had to pay his wages for a long time, and I think that stayed with him. And as I say, if Rondon's people start cranking the money up and cranking the demands up, he'll just pull the plug on it, and that's sadly the way it is.
And
with
yet,
I was just going to say, with Rondon, the thing I've always thought is there's almost like a fundamental difference in vision from Benitez and the club. So I think that the way the club see it as is that for someone of that price, we can get you a 23-year-old from somewhere on the continent who, in our eyes, can do the same sort of job. He's got a goal-scoring record of 10 to 15 goals a season, can do X, Y, and Z. But for Benitez, he identified Rondon as the player he wanted in that team to do a specific role. There are very few players in the way that he wants to play in that sort of price bracket who Benitez believes can do exactly what Rondon's going to do. It's a very specific role that he's got. And I think that there's this difference in idea there. I think the club see it as, but there's so many other strikers that you get for that sort of price, for a younger age, more sell-on value, who you can mould it and doing that. And Benitez's like, yeah, but Rondon's going to do what I want him to do right now. He's going to be the focal point of my team. And that is the fundamental difference, I think, there. And I don't think the two sides have come together properly on that yet.
I mean, I'll give you an example of where Rafa is on that. The Huddersfield game back in December, that was, at the time, that was a crunch game for Newcastle. I know Huddersfield have gone on and they've faded and they've been relegated, but at the time that was very much an active relegation battle. On that day, I think Rondon had one chance, didn't he? And he buried it. You put a 23-year-old in who's come in from Spain or Italy or Portugal or wherever, and they're in that situation, they're having a bit of trouble. You miss that chance, you don't win that game, the momentum changes. And I think that's what Rafa's trying to get across to the powers that be, that I need players who can stay cool in certain situations and get me the win on the day. And at the minute, I just think they're a little bit, they're quite far apart on that agreement. hence all the stories this week of waiting 2 or 3 weeks for decisions and answers.
To be fair, that's not really the club's position. The club's position is actually the opposite. The club want to just make 2 or 3. They argue.
Now they do, but the time when Joselu came in.
That's not. To be fair, the position was still the same then, but the issue was that the players they wanted, but the players they would have sanctioned were different to the ones that Benitez wanted for that sort of price. So in the end, it came to a compromise, and everyone got what nobody wanted essentially, and they ended up signing players like Joselu at a lower price because they were the only ones that would sanction of an experienced sort of age at that sort of level. But the club have always maintained that they wanted to sign 2. They've said sign 2-3 players, £20 million each, 23, 24 years of age. You can go straight into your first team. Benitez has a different vision, because he doesn't just want players under the age of 26. He wants more of a blend there. He wants experience. He also would ideally like 2 players for every single position, which I think is something the club would prefer, just to have 11 first teamers, for example. Not have a squad, but I mean that they would prefer to think, right, this summer we're going to sign 3 players, they'll definitely go in the first team, rather than Benitez thinking, well, I've only got 1 player who can play it, let's just pick a position up. I've only got 1 player who can play right back, I need someone else who can push him, I need 5, 6, 7 players this summer. They want it focused on 2 or 3 to fit their model. Benitez wants more variation, and that's again a fundamental difference between the two.
So just throw some words out from what Lee Charney said. Young development, high quality, to do it sustainably and without risking the financial health of the club. Does that inspire you if you're a fan and you read those words? Is that inspiring? Do you worry? You read that, and I'd say some would say, well, it's not the exact opposite to what Benitez wants, but it's not exactly listed with experience, which is a key demand of what Benitez is after.
I mean, at the minute they're just words. High quality. What is high quality? Is it going to be someone like Joe Linton, who comes in from Germany, who's done okay over there, but really, would you class him as a marquee signing? Some fans would say no. I would say it's a signing what's got a lot of prospect and could do well, given the right service, given the right sort of management, given the right manager. You look at Rafa, could he bring out the best in him? Yes. Could someone else? It's hard to say. I mean, look at the Mitrovic situation. Mitrovic came in, everyone was absolutely buzzing when Mitrovic signed, and it just didn't work for him. Was McLaren the right manager for him? I was told at the time McLaren had nothing to do with Mitrovic coming in. It was very much a Graham Carr situation. That deal was already pretty much done before McLaren even took the reins. And then after that, he went to his board and said, look, I didn't want Mitrovic, get me someone else. And he couldn't sign someone else because there was no money left. So it's a tough situation. When you say you're going to get high quality, you've now got to go out and get high quality, because you've said it on paper, you've made a pledge, you've made a promise to the fans. They've got to go out and do it now. And part of me thinks that this Joe Linton deal may be further down the line than people think.
And in terms of when Lee says about being words, actions speak a lot louder than words. If you just go back to the January window, all of us in this room, including myself, we were very critical with the fact that Almiron deal didn't look like it was going to happen. They weren't going to. Eventually, they got the deal done, albeit painstakingly long time it took. They maintained that they saved a lot of money because of that. But if they go this summer, A, if Rafa Benitez stays, and then B, they go this summer and make a few signings who really do improve the first team, be they under the age of 26 or over the age of 26, whatever it is, and they put the money they say they have into the resources, then I think the mood will suddenly change. I'm not saying it'll change dramatically, because I've maintained over the last decade what Mike Ashley has done before, but the mood changed radically when Almiron did eventually sign. Suddenly there was optimism, suddenly there's positivity. You've seen the impact he's made into the way Newcastle play himself. If they can make a couple more signings like that going forward on a regular basis, then that's exactly what everyone wants to see. There may not be the names that the household names in Oregon. Almiron was not a household name in Newcastle or the Premier League before he came across here. He's quickly become a firm fan's favourite, and I think we will see the best of him next season rather than this season. But it's about making sure that they identify the right players and that they do improve the team in the right areas, and where the manager says they need to improve. That's the crucial thing.
So in a sentence then, each just kind of sum up your take on the accounts.
For me, it'll be very much, let's watch this space.
I've just written a piece basically saying this, that I think that was the club basically putting out their position during contract talks with Benitez, saying these are the red lines we have, this is where we've been willing to compromise, and this is the situation as it is. Although they didn't say any of that, and they were keen not to talk about Benitez's contract situation, I think all the figures, you can see all the quotes from Charlie where he said within it about competing in every competition, which is different to something they've said before. The fact that they seem to want to say they're going to give Benitez certain money going forward, but then stressing that in certain areas he's going to have to compromise himself. Training ground isn't going to be upgraded anytime soon. He's not going to be able to just go out and sign experienced players. They're going to want to stick to the model. So I know that's a longer sentence than you wanted, but that was just me trying to explain what I mean by that, them putting out their position.
I mean, just picking up on one of the things you just said there, I mean, competing in every competition, I mean, it's almost an empty promise, because that's saying you're going to compete with Manchester City. And Man City have already won one cup. They're probably going to win the FA Cup as well. So you've got to look at it and think this is a big statement. Really, on paper, you've said you're going to compete in every competition. If they get knocked out in the third round after playing 7 reserves in the next January, they haven't delivered.
And you did just remind us there, the training ground. Obviously, a lot of fans not happy with the facilities now. Lee Charney's come out and made a point that Newcastle still won the championship. Players still come to the club. No players turned around and said we're not signing because of the training ground. But you look at it, and I mean, it's nowhere near the facilities of most teams in the Premier League.
It's not bad. It's not bad, but it needs upgrading.
It does. And the interesting point is that Lee Charney has said, well, I'd rather spend it on players, but why can't the club do both?
Well, this of all of the answers that we got on Wednesday, for me, probably the most unsatisfactory was on the training ground. It was something where we had a bit of back and forth for a few minutes talking about it, and there is a acceptance within the club that the training ground long term is something they want to improve. They've said this since 2014 though, when we've had all the plans, and there is no promise as to when that will be. Now their argument is that we want to prioritise improving the first team because we need to make sure a Premier League team going forward, and that's we don't. And basically their argument is we don't have the money to be able to go and do the training ground in one big hit, and also to improve the player pool. Now, at some stage, though, I think they're gonna have to do that because they are being left behind. You look at the likes of Brighton, Leicester are investing in a new training ground. Burnley have got a new training ground. Bournemouth, all these clubs are doing that, and I don't disagree with the point that he made that Newcastle won the championship, even though they've got the training ground that they have. The facilities are good, but they're not the same level, and you've always got to be looking for progress going forward. But maybe they could have been even better if they had the training ground. Maybe they could have better medical facilities. Maybe they wouldn't get certain injuries on the training pitch because they redeveloped the whole thing. Maybe it would just be a better environment for players going forward. Every single piece of evidence suggests that the better facilities you have, the better your performance is likely to be going forward. And yes, he may make the argument that no players ever not sign for Newcastle because they've seen the training ground. But maybe someone's seen a training ground elsewhere where they've been to Newcastle and been tempted away because of that. I just think that long term this is something that needs to be sorted. I understand the club want to work within the means as they say, but at some point I think that that's an investment that needs to be made, and whether they have to borrow money or the owner has to put money in to do it, I think it should be done in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with that. Just a quick word that we're taking Gibbo's Corner out to a live audience. Tickets £5. It's May the 2nd. That goes to the food bank. You can head over to our website to get all the details and to buy the tickets.